Welcome to Pharmacy Friends, a podcast dedicated to bringing industry experts to the same virtual table to talk about what is happening in pharmacy today, what is coming in the future, and most importantly, what it means to you. Today's episode is brought to you by the MRX Specialty Summit. The Magellan RX Specialty Summit is back in New York City. Mark your calendar for August 29th through 31st and get ready to connect to better ideas, brilliant solutions, and the best industry thought leaders at the live event. Check out MagellanRx.com for more information. The Magellan RX team can't wait to connect with you in person. Welcome back, pharmacy friends. Ever wonder how you can truly motivate people to change their habits? How to get someone who would never take their medication to finally follow through with it? On today's episode, we are taking you on an in-depth exploration of behavioral economics and how healthcare is being transformed through technology. With us today is Vice President of Clinical Strategy and Programs from Magellan RX, Sagar Makanji. Joining Sagar is Matt Loper, CEO and co-founder of Wellth, a company focused on leveraging the science of behavioral economics to help people form new healthy habits and create lasting behavior change. Please note that any references to dollar amount rewards during this podcast are general in nature. Wellth and its financial reward program has been reviewed for compliance and applicable rules. Let's get right into it.
Hi, pharmacy friends. My name is Sagar Makanji, and I am the Vice President of Clinical Strategy and Programs here at Magellan RX. In my role, I primarily focus on design, implementation, and operations for clinical quality initiatives to help our patients achieve the best outcomes possible. And that is really one of the many ways that Magellan helps our patients live healthy and vibrant lives through their healthcare journey. Today, we're going to talk about the complexities behind what can really appear to be a fairly simple task, taking your medications as prescribed. Sounds easy enough. Go to the doctor, they tell you that you need to take a medication or two to help improve your health, and then you take that right dose at the right time. However, there's several studies out there that have shown that non-adherence can account for almost half of all treatment failures, avoidable hospital visits, and unfortunately, billions of dollars in unnecessary healthcare expenditures. Taking medications as prescribed is certainly very important when we think about controlling the conditions of whether they be chronic or temporary, and just your overall long-term health and well-being. It will essentially benefit the entire healthcare ecosystem. Now, there are a lot of solutions out there that can help the patients, right? You have pharmacist counseling, text message reminders, automated refills, motivational interviewing, and so much more. But today, we're going to talk about a very different approach to this long-standing healthcare challenge by using behavioral science. I'm excited to be here today with a special guest, Matt Loper, who is the CEO and co-founder of Wellth, which is a technology-based company rooted in behavioral economics and design solutions to improve the quality of care for patients across the country. Matt, welcome.
Thanks so much for having us, Sagar, and everyone at the Magellan team. As Sagar mentioned, I'm Matt Loper, CEO and co-founder of Wellth, and we really focus on, really helping payers and risk-bearing providers help manage and motivate the hardest, most challenging portions of their population just to adopt these new behaviors every day. And of course, across the various disease states we serve, medications is by far the most prominent behavior that we seek to change on a daily basis. And we have about 4 million behaviors have been validated through our app over the course of the years, and 80% of those are medication related. So really excited to be here and chat a little bit more about our mission and our work.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, Matt. I'm really excited to actually just jump in and start talking about the science behind Wellth and how you've successfully been able to motivate the patients. But before we get into that, can you just start us off with just telling us a little bit about your company and kind of what motivated you or how you actually started it?
Absolutely. I think there are so many reasons why we do the things we do. And, there's kind of like, that's the whole point of Wellth in general, is to try to figure out, what drives human behavior and how do you change it and influence it for the better. So I can't point to one single thing as to why I made this, what many would have called a crazy, irrational decision to quit my job and start a very risky startup. But I think there are a number of contributing factors. The first one being that I've always been a science geek. I've always, since I was in high school, dreamed of someday starting a biotech company that's going to be able to impact populations at scale and help, reduce suffering, reduce mortality and morbidity at scale. So I went to college with that mindset. I was very fortunate enough to go to MIT, where they were just starting a new bioengineering track. So it was like literally my dream, kind of place to be, to kind of learn the newest and latest, greatest research in biological sciences. But very quickly, I realized that, hey, I am this undergrad here, and my professors are the best in the world at what they do. And maybe 1 in 30 of them are lucky enough to work a 30-year career and make that game-changing discovery in that lab that eventually becomes a life-saving therapeutic. So I said, I am almost certainly not them, and I don't have that patience to wait 30 years. So went a different track, tried to figure out, okay, so how could I help start many biotech companies a year to perhaps, do this much more quickly. Kind of learned about this thing called venture capital, reverse engineered my way into how do you get into that industry. Long-winded way of saying, I actually ended up achieving that dream job, and I was at a firm called OrbiMed Advisors, which is one of the largest healthcare investment firms on Wall Street. So it's like my dream job, my dream firm, everything was great. But I still had that itch of like, I want to build something. I don't want to just, make our investors more money. I want to think about how can I actually create this impact at scale. And at that time, the shift to value-based care was super prevalent. Everyone was talking about it. And I just went back to first principles and thought, wait a second, if you align the incentives between the payers and providers, that helps a little bit, but it's not like providers today are telling patients the wrong things to do on purpose, right? The problem is that the patient, the human, is the person who goes home and makes the daily decisions that makes the outcomes come true over the long term. So for this value-based care thing to be successful, we have to extend the incentives that are currently being extended from the payer to the provider, and also take that one step further and give them to the patients to change their behaviors. And then, I think probably the other super impactful kind of part of that decision-making process was my family history, right? So my mom had 2 siblings. She both had type 2 diabetes, but I saw the difference between those 2 individuals based on just what behaviors they did every day, right? So my Uncle Roy, he was the type of person who, no matter what we did, he would say, yeah, I'm going to go to my doctor appointment. I'm going to go pick up my prescriptions. And he would never follow through. And he knew what he should do. He actually wanted to do those things. He just wouldn't follow through, right? And he ended up very sick, very poorly controlled diabetic, ended up on dialysis in the late 90s, got a kidney transplant in 2003, and he passed away in 2014 after having a massive stroke, right? So, he had very, very bad health, morbidity, and mortality outcomes because he didn't do these daily behaviors. On the other side, my auntie Amy, she's like the most diligent person you've ever imagined, right? She's the type that, we get home from dinner, she checks her glucometer right away. She has every pill laid out in one of those reminder tackle boxes and takes every single dose, right? So she's to this day completely healthy, right? So 2 people with the same exact condition, the same exact genetics, the same exact upbringing, the same social determinants of health factors, all of those factors are the same, but the difference between their outcomes is the behavior they're doing on a daily basis. So I'd say that's probably the primary reason why I decided to take this journey and try to figure out how can we help as many patients out there like Uncle Roy, who are well-intentioned, who want to do the right thing, but just need that little extra motivation to do, quote unquote, the right thing for their long-term outcomes.
Yeah, thank you for that background. I think it's very helpful to understand, because ultimately those past experiences really help us shape and help you shape, I think, what the solution really looks like to reach out to and impact those patients like Uncle Roy. When I think a little bit more about just the science behind it, and especially comparing your uncle to your aunt, for your aunt, it seems like the more of the classical economic play, right? You learn something about your health and condition. You understand what you need to do because someone has explained it to you, and you basically act in your best interest, right? Which is really how, when we think about it, a lot of solutions are built. A lot of the things I said earlier about pharmacist counseling and reminders and even just member education have really focused on it. But I know with behavioral economics, it almost turns itself upside down in many ways, right? Because we're saying that humans are predictably irrational, which is a different approach and a different way, fundamentally, really thinking about this. Can you talk a little bit more about just the science of the behavioral economic component and essentially why it works?
Absolutely. So yeah, this is a very interesting and fun area of research. It's what's so fun about it is it's a lot of the learnings from behavioral economics are counterintuitive to everything that we thought previously, right, or what we were taught in school. And so it all boils down to this simple premise, which is classical economics. If you think back to probably, in high school when you studied history, you learned about this guy named Adam Smith that wrote a book called Wealth of Nations back in the day. And the whole thing was this invisible hand that guides individuals and therefore markets to the rational outcome, right? So all of economics, even back when I took college economics courses, I remember the number one, the first day you get to class, the professor would write assumption number one, humans are rational actors, right? And so what's wrong about that is we all are humans, and we all sometimes make irrational decisions, right? And so actually what we've learned over time, if you combine the field of psychology with the economics, you can actually start to understand how and why decisions get made. And what it boils down to, you can look at this field of research from even a neuroscience lens, or you could do it more from a psychology lens, or you could do it more from an economic lens. But what it boils down to is our brains, there are two different parts of our brains, right? There's the rational part of our brains, which is the kind of prefrontal cortex. It's very much like what we use when we do complex math, right? We only use that. About 5% of the behaviors we do are driven by that system. The limbic system, or the more subconscious system, which is about 95% of the behaviors we do on a daily basis, is the quick thinking, right? So there's a very famous book in this space by one of the most prominent behavioral economists called Thinking Fast and Slow, right? That's the concept of thinking slow, is that slow, rational decision-making process, us doing this hard math problem. Thinking fast is most of the things we do on a daily basis. And what happens there is that part of our brain, it uses shortcuts, it uses heuristics to just make that quick decision, right? So the reason why this really matters when we think about patients and patient behavior change is that most of the behaviors you do on a daily basis are driven by that quick thinking, right? And when you think about a behavior like taking your medications every day, or eating that healthy food, or even going to the gym or going for that run, rationally that's the thing you should do, right? So you have that intent, but oftentimes we don't follow through with that intent, and there's this gap between the intent and the end behavior. So why does that exist? Well, doing that thing that is quote unquote good for us and we know is going to prevent that heart attack 4 or 5 years from now it gives us no immediate gratification. In fact, in some cases like that, going for the run, it gives us immediate pain. And our brains have been evolved over time to only focus on the immediate gratification you get from that behavior, not that long-term outcome, right? So this is a concept that behavioral economists call present bias. We're so biased to the present that you even see this if you interview people, when they're out with their friends having drinks. They know they're going to have a hangover the next morning if they stay out and have that one more drink, but they're so present biased, they'd rather have that fun in the moment than 12 hours later waking up with a hangover. So again, applying this to this medication-taking behavior, the diabetic, the hypertensive, the asthmatic, right? They know they should take this metformin or this blood pressure medication or this inhaler to prevent that thing in the future from happening. But when they take it right now, they feel no different right now. So on the other side of the coin, they know that they shouldn't eat that slice of pizza or that, burrito, but it tastes really good right now, right? So this present bias gets in the way of us making that right decision. And then, Sagar, back to your point, a lot of people have tried to solve, quote unquote, the adherence problem before, but we didn't have this lens. We didn't have this complete view of human behavior. So what happens? You ask a patient, why didn't you take your pill? And the patient says, I forgot, right? The reason they say I forgot is because they lack the terminology that this behavioral or this present bias lens would lend. Actually what's happening is I'm not motivated by doing that thing. And it's not that they forgot, they still know they should be taking their pills. So what happened was we created a range of solutions that solve for quote unquote forgetfulness, right? Which is reminders, right? Well, what happens when you start getting a reminder that you're not motivated to do that thing? It quickly becomes a nuisance. You say, stop bugging me, right? We created a set of tools that just track whether or not I did that behavior, right? So we put chips and pills and chips and pill bottles and chips and inhalers. And so now, I always come back to Uncle Roy, right? Okay, now Uncle Roy has a very expensive pill bottle telling us he's not taking his pills every day. It does nothing to actually change that behavior, right? And then you also mentioned education, right? So we sit Uncle Roy down and we try to give him a 30-minute lecture on here's your body, here's how it works, here's why the metformin is so effective. And he zones out after 2 minutes, right? Because again, the decision isn't being made by the rational part of his brain, it's being made by that instant gratification, right? So what we have done over time is tried to hone in on exactly what set of interventions can change this behavior. And we look at this behavior change as a time series. Not one time did you change the behavior, it's how do you change this behavior over time? And the first time you change the behavior is going to be the hardest, right? It's going to take the most effort or cognitive load to do that new behavior. But then over time, it incrementally starts getting easier and easier, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, right? So any of us that have done, New Year's resolutions know that's the case, right? Like if you do the thing that you set the resolution for every day for about 2 weeks, it starts to become more and more automatic. So what we do is we try to combine all of these different concepts from behavioral economics in a way that's hyper-personalized to that individual, their disease state, their past behaviors, their cultural background, their socioeconomic status, right? All these different factors. How do we create this profile of this population or this individual to maximize their success in this journey, right? Just how do you get their attention? How do you get a hold of someone? How do you give them a message that's actually interesting to them and motivating to them, and they know it's not a spam outreach or even worse, a scam? How do you create this motivation to act? Well, there's this concept called the endowment effect. This is a concept that Richard Thaler at University of Chicago actually primarily got his Nobel Prize for in 2017. And the concept is if you give someone credit for something up front and say, hey, you already have this, they start to value that thing, and then you can get them to act, right? So back before we stopped flying due to the pandemic, American Airlines, you might have noticed, does the endowment effect on you, right? When you're about to land at your destination, they say, here's 60,000 miles to sign up for our credit card. And they start to play these even greater psychological tricks on you where they say, that's enough to take you and your family on this nice vacation to Hawaii. And so then you start to think about that vacation and how good that would feel. So then you're already ramped up. And when they come around to pass out those applications for the credit card, you're already feel like those are your miles and you want to take it, right? So we do that same thing. We say to our members, hey, we already put $30 a month in your account. That's your money. We really want to help you get and keep that money, right? So that's the endowment effect. That's just to get that first action. How do you get them to sign up? How do you get them to use an app? And a lot of our populations are Medicaid, Medicare, or dual eligible. So, we have to understand where our members are and their tech savviness and their trust of the healthcare system and digital tools and meet them at where they are and help them through that process, right? So then every day, how do we get this motivation to get the behavior to happen that day? Well, we leverage what's called loss aversion. And this is a concept from behavioral economics that humans are twice as motivated by potential loss than potential gain, right? So they start with the $30 a month. Every day, we say, okay, it's time to take your medications to avoid the loss of $2. That gets twice the motivation for the behavior to happen. They can do it quickly and simply. Boom, they get this immediate and salient feedback in the moment. Great job, you kept the $2. and then you do that every day. And there's this whole nother field of research, which is called the power of habits, or the science of habit formation. Books in the space include Atomic Habits, The Power of Habits. You might have seen those on Amazon bestsellers. So how do you form a habit? You have a cue, a routine, and this immediate and salient reward, right? So if you think about any habit, even bad habits like smoking, what happens is you have this cue, this craving, you have this routine, you light up this cigarette, and you have this reward immediately. There's this nice little dopamine hit, right? So we try to use that same exact framework to create good habits. So you have this cue, it's time to take your medications. That cue has to be salient and timely and contextual to you at that moment, right? So a lot of the past work in trying to change behaviors with incentives, they just don't get this part right? Where, hey, here's $25 to get your flu shot. You get that mailer, and then you don't have the ability. You're on the way to work. You don't have the ability to go get a flu shot right now. By the time you get done with work that day, you forgot that incentive even existed, right? So the cue has to be timely. Hey, it's 8 a.m. You're about to eat your breakfast. Don't forget to take your pill, right? The behavior has to be easy and simple to do, right? So you just take a picture of those pills in your hand, and then the reward has to be salient to the behavior as it happens to reinforce it into a habit. And so you get this immediacy to it. You do that every single day, cue, routine, reward. And after about 90 days, this new behavior starts to become a really nice sticky habit. So I know that was a very long-winded explanation on all the various concepts of behavior change that we try to integrate into this scalable but also personalizable intervention for all the patients we serve. And we're constantly, our moat, or our competitive advantage, is constantly looking at how can we further optimize this thing to maximize success for each of these cohorts, these different age groups, these different cultural backgrounds, these different disease states, so that ultimately our end output is savings to the healthcare system, to our clients, to the payer, the risk-bearing provider, the employer, whoever it is. So if we can maximize the success at each of those steps, it will spit out the most savings possible, which the thing I love about my job is we are creating value for everyone, right? We're aligning the incentives of the system, the payer, the provider, but most important to us is the patient, the member. They're the ones that, we don't want to do anything that is creating value for the system without creating value for the member. So that's what's so cool, is when you see all those things align and everyone benefits.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Matt, thanks for that explanation. I think it is very important to understand the fundamentals behind behavioral economics to truly understand the impact it can have. Things like you mentioned, present bias, the intent behavior gap, the endowment effect, and even the idea of loss aversion, right? Where almost dollar for dollar, you can literally have twice the impact by just the structure of how you actually give that money, because you're not just giving it for doing something, you're actually avoiding taking it away. And that simple idea can literally have twice the impact. I think that's super important and very, very critical to understanding how we can not only just design the solutions, but also maximize the impact, that we want to have. You also mentioned, one thing that kind of just caught my attention was around the personalization of the solution itself. A lot of times we have a lot of these scale solutions, but there's very little room to personalize because you're trying to build scale, right? You need to have economies of scale in order to be competitive. Can you share a little bit more about what are some of the different ways that we're able to actually make it more customized for the patient based on their behaviors and their understandings? I think that's very important to meeting the patients where they are. Like you said, it's not just about the right dose at the right time, even when it comes to medications, but also the right patient and understanding what ultimately is going to drive them for that desired behavior.
Yeah. So I think, I have these big picture theories that actually this is being done to us at scale already, but all of the companies or systems that are deploying these tools are doing it to extract value at the net detriment to society, right? So if you think about what social media and the algorithms are optimizing for now on social media, it is hyper-personalizing and it is very much changing our behaviors, but they're optimizing for engagement. And oftentimes the things that get the most engagement are the things that either, going back to behavioral economics, really piss us off, right? And getting that kind of irrational part of our brain ramped up, or really make us feel good, right? So what does that do? It makes us feel these extremes. It makes us even further polarized as a society, right? So I think that, kind of when we look at, okay, how do we do this in a way that, again, is at the benefit to the system and the benefit to the user, the patient, we think about, okay, so what are we trying to achieve with that individual? We're trying to get them to take these actions today that prevent these very bad things in the future from happening. So how do we get that personalized experience? Well, it's with data, right? We have this theory about 4 years ago, which we called our data flywheel, right? We didn't make this up, like Amazon's had a data flywheel and stuff, but when we apply this concept of the flywheel to wealth, the way it works is, hey, so we first get started, we have a very small population. We work with that population, we learn from it. So with more patients comes more behavioral data. Based on that more behavioral data, we are better able to iterate on our intervention, right? Create better interactions, take more of these concepts from behavioral economics and apply them in different ways at different times to create better outcomes. What does better outcomes do? Well, it gets more demand from customers, which therefore leads to more patients. So this flywheel gets completed, right? It becomes a circle. The better we do, the more patients we get, the more patients we get, the more data we get, the more data we get, the better we are at doing our job, which creates better outcomes, which then creates more demand over and over again into, hopefully the end of time. So that concept has actually been proven to us, to ourselves, just recently. And so this is what's so cool is I'm going to talk about one specific client, which is Arizona Complete Health, Arizona. It's a Medicaid program. We launched with them in March of 2020, right? Our first cohort together, we enrolled 3,000 members in about 90 days. In that member population, we were able to generate, across 3 different cohorts, one with serious mental illness and substance use disorders. One was a cohort of men with chronic conditions, so more like the diabetes, cardiovascular disease type stuff, and then a population of women with chronic conditions, right? So we were able to produce really good results in that population, right? The better adherence we were able to achieve produced about a 44% reduction to inpatient utilization. Great landmark results for us, helped us scale with that client, and then served as a case study for many others, right? But what's so interesting is that first year took us about 90 days to enroll 3,000 members. The reason we were able to do that pretty quickly is because we already had from other clients tens of thousands of outreaches to Medicaid eligible members. So what we're able to do is we're able to take each of those outreaches in our CRM, tag what happened. We're able to get a hold of the person. If we got a hold of them, did they say yes? If they said no, why? Or did we leave a voicemail, or was the phone number out of date, right? When you're reaching out to Medicaid eligible folks, the biggest hurdle is oftentimes you're not able to reach them, right? Phone number has changed. They are working 2 jobs and they're hard to reach, whatever it may be, right? So what we were able to do at the start of our March 2020 program is create a data model, a machine learning model, to try to prioritize at any given time who in that list of, we had about 20,000 eligible lives, are we reaching out to? So our member educators or our member enrollment specialists, they were only calling the hottest lead, so to speak, in terms of it's 3 p.m. on Friday afternoon, who in this population is most likely to pick up based on their age, their cultural background, their region, their past attempts, right? All these complex data models. So what happened? We ran that program for a year, and now not only did we have that initial who picked up the phone, who enrolled, who downloaded the app, but now we had a year of data on their behavior over time. And we were able to look at the differences between these 3 different groups, right? As you can imagine, people with substance use disorders and serious mental illness have different types of behaviors and retention than someone with cardiovascular disease, right? So then we even got 5 million lines of claims outcomes back from that client. We were able to see the end output, which is what we're always optimizing for, who improved the hospitalizations and inpatient utilization and ED utilization the most. So now we went into year 2, which launched in August of 2021. Now this new population, we were able to take those new data toolkits and apply them at scale. Instead of just being who's most likely to pick up the phone, we now had also who's most likely to enroll in the program, who's most likely to stick with the program. If they're going to drop off, when are they going to drop off? How can we predict the drop off before it happens? And then ultimately, who improves the most, right? So what's so exciting is when we look at that first year, March 2020 program versus the August 2021 program, same exact cohort, same exact populations, we enrolled about a 40% bigger population in 1/3 the time. So we enrolled a bigger population much more quickly. And then if you look at the metrics that we have so far, we don't have claims yet since it's still, kind of just launched about 6 months ago. But what we see is the daily retention, the daily adherence. Every single one of those cohorts is outperforming the 2020 cohort by about 10 to 15%. So not only do we enroll more people more quickly, but they're actually doing better on the program, right? So that is the proof that this data flywheel actually exists. And there's all these different reasons why, right? There's the better selection, the better targeting, reaching out to the right person with the right message. But then there's also all the little tiny things that you don't see, right? And I love this concept that on the surface, our program seems so simple. We pay people through an app to do things, but beneath the surface, it's so complex and there's so much nuance to it, right? So great, you got that person with diabetes to check in, but what do you show them right after they check in? That might be different than someone with serious mental illness, right? There might be different, hey, if someone misses a dose, two people have the same exact percent adherence, right, over the course of a month. They both miss 3 days over the course of a month. The person who missed 3 days in a row in the middle of the month and got right back in track and then hasn't missed a dose since is very different than someone who missed 3 days sporadically over the course of the month, right? The first person might have, gone on vacation with their family or lost their cell phone for a few days or something, and then got right back on track. They do have this habit established of taking their pills every day. The person who sporadically misses is still not in that kind of pure habit formation, kind of steady state. So these little nuances, these little details beneath the surface are what really helps us maximize these outcomes for that given individual and personalize the program for that given individual. So yeah, I love that concept. And if you apply that same lens to Google, right, the Google search bar itself hasn't changed since probably 1998, right? It's still just a text box with their little Google logo. Yes, some days they have different logos, but the interface doesn't change, which has, Google's invested tens, probably hundreds of billions into is what is everything beneath the surface to get that result back to you more effectively, quicker, more personalized to you, et cetera, right? So that same kind of framework you could apply to our program, right? It's all the stuff beneath the surface, which creates that personalization to create the right message at the right time. That's what really matters.
Yeah, that's a great point. When you think about it, there's billions of data points that are being taken into account to make sure that it is as personalized as it can be. And like you said, it's a constantly evolving process. It's essentially continuous quality improvement from an improvement perspective, really, which is phenomenal when you think about it, because it makes us that much better and that much more successful in impacting the healthy behavior. You mentioned something about, the reward component, and I wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit. When you're thinking about it, right, there's obviously a lot of solutions out there that do give rewards in various ways, right? Gym memberships, cash or credit card or gift cards. But how do you go about figuring out what is the right dollar amount to inspire action? And, where is that healthy balance that you're trying to achieve?
Absolutely. So yeah, this comes back from, our 7+ years of research, right? And standing on the shoulder of giants of all of the past researchers that have done research previously, right? And trying to incorporate their learnings into our interventions. So yeah, I think, first of all, a lot early on when we were starting, there were a lot of other healthcare vendors or technologies that tried to incorporate incentives or did incorporate incentives to change behaviors. My very cynical view is that a lot of those interventions actually weren't designed to change behavior. They were designed to selectively discount for people who are already doing those things, right? So the classic gym membership reimbursement incentive. Well, what does that do, right? You have to go to the gym 20 times a month. You have to fill out this form where the front desk of the gym prints out all your visits. You have to mail that in. And then 3 months later, you get this check in the mail back for your $300 to pay for a gym membership, right? That's exactly counter to all the stuff we said before that's effective for behavior change, right? A timely and contextual cue, a routine that's simple and easy. That's the most complicated routine you can imagine. And the timeliness and salience of the reward, as soon as it happens, as soon as the behavior happens, you get the reward, right? You get the reward 3 months later, right? So that quote unquote incentive is not designed to actually change behaviors. It's designed to reward people who are already super diligent and going to the gym every day and willing to go through that very complex process, right? So when we started, we looked at a lot of the stuff that's been done with incentives in the past in healthcare and just, kind of said, okay, how do we design something that actually changes behavior? Well, the first part of that is targeting people that need to change their behaviors, right? So targeting people that already are non-adherent or have poorly controlled outcomes or have high utilization. So that's the first very easy thing, is just select for the people who are most in need of behavior change. Then how do you create the most effective intervention possible, right? So the incentive amount matters, right? Which that over time we've tested various amounts in different ways with different language behind it. In different socioeconomic statuses, different amounts matter more, right? So that kind of combined effort has led us to this endowed progress with this daily loss, right? And in most of our Medicaid and kind of dual eligible populations, and even most of our Medicare Advantage populations, we found that about $1 a day up front is enough to get action from most populations. And then we create this asymmetric loss, right? So you get $1 a day of credit, but you lose $2 if you don't do the behavior. So that was, based on a bunch of research we did when we even first started. There's a group at University of Pennsylvania called the Center for Health Incentives and Behavioral Economics. They're really the thought leaders in the research space when it comes to this research. And they've done a number of studies over the course of years, and they started a lot with lotteries. Those lotteries, they had a really successful intervention for warfarin adherence. The first warfarin study had $5 a day and $3 a day of lottery incentives. Both were massively successful, but saw about the same results. So what does that show you? Okay, there's this curve where there starts to get to a point where enough money is enough to change the behavior, and there's decreasing marginal returns on the incremental dollar. So which means, who knows where that point is, and it depends on the different population. But at some point, you're paying enough. Paying more doesn't necessarily improve the behavior more, right? So over time they started to hone in on this about $1.40 a day. Was that point for their populations that they were looking at to get that behavior to happen, right? So we took that $1.40 a day as our starting point. We started to test that in different populations over time, but then we layered into that concept, instead of using those lottery incentives, the endowment and the loss framing that we previously discussed, and we started to see these really good results with that, right? So over time, where we are now is we're starting to look at the time series of that behavior change, right? So you could imagine a program that even paid you way more upfront to get you started, just to maximize the number of people who enroll in the program. Then, as we mentioned, as you start to form a habit, it starts to become more and more automatic. So what is important there? Well, you can start to change the amount, right? And there's different ways you can change that amount, right? You could either just start to literally make it a little bit less every day, but perhaps that is not good, because now that people think they should be getting $1 a day, if you start to make that amount less, they might start to anchor that $1 a day and be dismotivated by that, right? So how do you start to change the amount? By increasing the time. So you still get $30 per cash out, but the timing of each cash out, instead of on day 30, now it happens day 40, 50, 60, etc. How do you start to layer back intrinsic motivators to keep that behavior going? So things like family support, things like streaks, right? Things that are intrinsically motivating on top of the extrinsic motivation of the money. So over time, we've been able to kind of create this really cool experiment at scale of how to best change these behaviors over time and how to change that incentive amount to maximize the ROI for our customers. So now we're in cohorts that are 4 years into the program and seeing this same very sticky habit at much lower dollar amounts once the behavior gets established.
And, that's really a good point about the fact that it's not just like a set it and forget it kind of thing when it comes to the dollar amounts that we're looking to set. It's really going to be, there's a certain level of there's a little bit of a dynamic nature really that comes with this part of the program. I'm going to put on my skeptic hat for a second here. And obviously you've probably gotten this question here. What happens when the reward goes away completely, right? Obviously the goal is to develop those healthy behaviors, but most payers probably don't want to keep paying the member indefinitely, right? Nobody would want to, right? Because then it probably becomes more about the money than anything else. So how do we tackle that part of the question or that part of the challenge? And what have you seen based on your experience that helps us understand that we are truly impacting the behavior itself and that it's not necessarily this incentive or this dollar amount that's really driving the change for the longer term?
Absolutely. So yeah, there's a lot there to unpack. First is just, can you create a lasting habit with behavior change, incentivized behavior change? A number of studies have looked into this, and basically the concept is, if you're rewarding the behavior every time, again, in this way where there's this key routine reward, and that's done over the course of about 90 days, you can create lasting sticky habits. But there's nuance to that, right? It depends on the behavior. It depends on the amount you're paying. You actually can pay too much, where then when you take the money away, right? So imagine if you were paying one of the neighborhood kids to mow your front lawn, and let's say the going rate for that is $10 a week, and you're paying this kid $100 a week to mow your lawn, and then you talk to your neighbor and they're like, no, like you should only be paying $10. And you tell that kid, well, I'm only gonna pay you $10 now. Even though $10, he would be happy to get the $10 if that's where you started. Since he's anchored to this $100, it feels like he's losing $90. Now he gets really dismotivated and he stops mowing your lawn, right? So in the same way, if you're overpaying for a behavior every day, then you stop paying it, it actually could be counterproductive. And then the member or the patient might be like, oh, well, I'm not going to keep doing this. I was getting $10 a day to take my pills. Now I'm not taking these pills anymore, right? So that sweet spot, right? And again, everything that we do is to try to find that optimal amount timing message to get that behavior to stick. So you have to pay the right amount. You have to create this habit. And then even if you take away the incentive altogether, there've been a number of studies that looked at, okay, what is the ongoing rate of that behavior does that behavior keep happening after the incentive ends? And again, if you structure the incentive in the right way with the right communication, many cases have shown, yes, that behavior can stick, right? So this has ranged from studies on medication adherence to remote monitoring with devices to even gym membership reimbursement or going to the gyms. So if you pay someone to go to the gym once versus if you pay them to go to the gym 5 days a week for many weeks, you get much better lasting habit once the incentive ends if you're paying them to establish the habit of going to the gym, right? So that's all what the research said. Now you look at this through the lens of the system, right? Our customers, which are big payers. So there's a few different things. So first of all, again, we're trying to, over time, reduce that dollar amount to the optimal point to get it so small that the payer would be quote unquote crazy to turn it off, right? Because again, we're selecting for their highest risk members. Just to get that daily engagement and keep them adherent over time is producing such a high ROI that years out, the dollar a day becomes more like 30 cents a day. Of course, the payer would keep paying that to get their daily attention and have 90% of their high-risk patients still taking a picture of those pills every day, or taking a picture of those glucometers every day, or going to those right doctor visits, right? So kind of the big picture framework I would apply is, how do we create such high actuarial returns where the cost of keeping the behavior going is so low that the savings are so high relative to that cost where it never should be turned off. However, so just to kind of clarify all the things I said into one statement. Yes, there are studies that show you can incentivize behavior change. If it's done in the right way, you can create a habit, and that habit can be sticky. Of course, there is going to be some drop off once the habit stops, or once the incentive stops, but it's better than the control groups in those studies. point two is we are trying to, at Wellth, optimize for the long-term cost of keeping the behavior going, where it becomes so cheap that it would never make sense to turn it off.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Matt. I think understanding the studies behind it, but then putting a realistic view or lens on in terms of like what we really should be doing, I think it's very important to balance those perspectives. One of the things I was hoping you could do for us is, Matt, maybe just from a member journey perspective, let's say today I'm going to sign up for the Wellth app. Can you just kind of walk us through what that member experience will be for, let's say, the first 30 days and the 90 days and so on, just so our listeners here can have an idea of what that member experience is going to look like and what to really expect when you start seeing all of this science and the data flywheel and all of the other data points in action. What does it mean for the consumer in terms of the member experience?
Great. Yeah. I mean, so for the member, they're going to start getting outreaches from us, right? And they're going to get a mailer. They might get a follow-up mailer if they don't act on the first one. They might get a text message. They might get an email. They might even be scrolling through their Facebook feed and see a targeted ad to them specifically. So what that is meant to do is just to create this understanding that, hey, there's this offer. This offer is intriguing. Some people act on it, and some people just have it in the back of their head, like, oh yeah, I saw something from my health plan that talked about this program. And then really, most of our enrollment is driven by that human interaction, right? So while yes, I believe that machine learning and artificial intelligence can change healthcare, it's in healthcare, especially in these kind of Medicaid, Medicare Advantage, and dual eligible populations, there has to be empathy. There has to be human connection. So when we are reaching out, right, we're reaching out to you as a member with a very personalized message, right? Like, hey, we understand that, you take these medications every day. We want to help you just take those medications as you're prescribed so that you stay out of the hospital. And, so much in fact that your health plan, we're working with your health plan, they already put $30 into your account. We want to help you get and keep that. And so we describe the program very transparently, because unfortunately, oftentimes when you get a phone call offering you money, it's too good to be true. It seems too good to be true because it is, right? But we have to very carefully make them understand, no, this is a real program. It's offered by your health plan, and here's the logic as to why it exists. Then we help them enroll, right? And that enrollment process, again, we have 3 members that are over the age of 100 years old, right? So like, it has to be so simple, right? They just say yes. It already has all their information in the background about which medications they take, who they are, et cetera, because we get that from the payer. So they get a text message to their phone with a link to download the app. They download the app while we're on the phone with them. We walk them through that process. Some of these folks have never downloaded an app before, right? They have a smartphone, but they maybe know how to FaceTime with it to the grandkids, but they've never gone to the app store and practically downloaded an app, right? So we walk them through that process. Again, make it as easy as possible to get them started. Takes, something between 5 and, maybe 25 minutes based on their level of sophistication with technology. What they do is we every step in that process, we try to take out as much effort as possible, right? So if they don't even create a username and password, we're able to do 2-factor authentication based on them verifying their identity by just telling us their name, their birth date, and where they live. And then we know it's them. We send them a text message. We already know that's their phone number associated with their account, right? So then that phone number becomes the unique identifier, right? They click that magic link, they're signed into the app right away, right? They teach us back the program to our member enrollment specialist. So they say, yeah, okay, I understand. Tomorrow I'm going to get a notification at 8 a.m. to take this pill to avoid losing 2 of the $30. I'm going to take that picture of the pills in my hand. And they actually do it in real time. They do a sample check-in through the app, take a picture of their hand, with or without pills that they're handy. We get that in real time, say, yeah, we got it. Looks like you have it. If you need anything from us, here's how to contact us, either through the app, through text message, or calling us, right? So that's the first day. And again, that's the hardest day to do a new behavior, is the first day. Day 2, they do this thing, right? They get this notification at a.m. They take a picture of those pills. They're like, oh, actually, that wasn't too hard. That was easy. It was actually even a little bit fun, right? Day 3, they're now excited to do it. Day 4, now it's becoming more and more ingrained into their daily routine, right? Et cetera. So over time, and then, again, some of the populations we serve have serious mental and substance use disorders, like very challenging life circumstances to overcome. So we're always there for them, right? We always teach our support specialists, like, we, first and foremost, we're like, treat this member as if it's your grandmother or your aunt or uncle or mother or father, right? So, we provide a lot of support to our members in this journey, right? And understand that sometimes they might miss a few doses in a row. There might be reasons why they miss doses. They might not like those medications, or they might have side effects of those medications. So all of those secondary reasons for non-adherence, we're trying to solve for too, right? So we work with our partners or health plans to, hey, if you have that issue with your medications, we'll connect you with clinical pharmacy. They'll do a medication review with you, and maybe there's an alternative medication we can get you on, right? So yeah, there's so many layers to how deep this can go, but I hopefully what I've communicated is that the process, the member journey is pretty simple, but there's a lot of support there for the member as they go.
Yeah, and that's helpful to know. I mean, as a pharmacist myself, and having deployed these interventions, personally years ago, I can certainly attest to the fact that being there for the member through any healthcare journey is always the right thing, and really does have an impact. And again, with the whole simplified process, I think it's very critical. I wanted to just also touch on a little bit about results. We've done a pilot with you guys with respect to adherence, and we've seen that, in that pilot group, average adherence of nearly 100%, which is definitely noteworthy. Even in addition to that, when I think about it, the other real benefit that we have is that we now have the ability for those members to track adherence in nearly real time. Most of the time, as a pharmacy benefit manager, or even generally when we're trying to leverage data to determine whether a member is adherent or non-adherent, most situations rely on pharmacy claims data, where you're doing a retrospective look. And really, at that point, you have to wait for the gap to occur before you can identify it. And in many instances, while better late than never, a lot of time has already elapsed, and you've already let that gap widen or already occur. In this instance, one of the other fringe kind of benefits I saw outside of just getting the members to take their medications is, if something does happen, whether they forget their phone or they actually are truly having an issue with their medications where they can't take it anymore, we are able to intervene in more real time as soon as they miss the first, second, or third dose, which has a lot of value from a clinical perspective, because again, when we think about the number of days that we're looking to cover, we always want to, as clinicians, maximize that as much as possible. And in speaking of results, Matt, I know you shared one earlier, but is there anything that kind of stands out, that you'd like to share, whether it's a member level or a client level, that really surmises and really puts together kind of all of this in terms of like, hey, this is how it all comes together, and here's kind of the end outcome, or an example of an end outcome?
Yeah, so I think that, we've always been very much a research-driven, outcomes-driven company, and we have so many, we're so fortunate now to have so many great partners and case studies from different regions of the US, even different regions of the world. We've worked with populations in Guam, we've worked with populations in Canada, and we've worked with so many different, kind of disease states, different, some Medicare Advantage, some commercial, some Medicaid, some dual eligibles, different cultural backgrounds, right? So it's so cool to see these results from these very different use cases all being very similar, right? So that's so encouraging, and we're so proud of those results. So we've seen, and it's all data, but really what I want to get to is the human impact, right? Because that's what motivates us, right? Is yes, the data on, so going back to our first study with UPenn, which was a peer-reviewed journal study, randomized controlled trial, which was published a few years ago, that showed a 45% reduction to readmissions post-heart attack, right? So first, okay, yes, this is working. Then we started to scale up. And one of the things I always like to say when people ask us about like, oh, well, this study showed this or this study showed that. Have you ever watched Great British Bake Off?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So my dad is a chemist, right? And chemistry is a hard science. If you have two research groups in different parts of the world doing a chemistry reaction under controlled settings, they'll have the same exact results. Mm-hmm. Behavior change isn't a hard science like chemistry. It's much more like baking. And on Great British Bake Off, you have 12 master bakers. They all get the same recipe, the same ingredients, but they have 12 very different cakes, right? So the same thing is true of behavior science, right? You'll have 12 different results from 12 different research groups because it all comes down to the nuance, right? How do you create this repeatable and scalable process, right? So the repeatability is crucially important, right? You get the same sort of results in different clients, different populations, and luckily, we've been very fortunate to be able to achieve that. But then the scalability is a whole nother thing, right? You could do one intervention in a couple hundred patients that's massively successful because you can really tightly manage that intervention. But then you go to scale it to tens of thousands, and it's just a whole nother science of how do you implement this at scale. Now we're starting to get to that scalability part, and it's so cool to see these results in these bigger populations hold true or even get better, as I mentioned before. So yeah, we've done this with first this very small scale study, 45% reduction to readmissions post heart attack with UPenn. Then we've done this with number of payers, right? Seen things like Medicaid, Arizona, the use case I talked about before, saw 44% reduction to inpatient utilization there. We did this with a Medicare Advantage plan in Michigan, Priority Health, one of our great new partners with Priority Health. They saw in a Medicare Advantage population, very different population, different demographics, same sort of results. There's about a 52% reduction to inpatient utilization in that group, right? So it's so cool to see this repeatability and the scalability, but then that's all data. You zoom into the personal side, and there's one recent story where I was going through a fundraising process, right, which is the least favorite part of my job, and it's so stressful, and you're always fits and starts, and you kiss 1,000 frogs, right, and then
yes.
only one prince turns out. So I was quite frankly in a very low place myself during this long slog towards the end of last year, and I was getting up to get on a flight, 6 a.m. flight up to San Francisco. So I was waking up at 4 a.m. and to meet with an investor, and I was just like, is this worth it, right? I get off that flight in SFO, and I have a message from our team saying, hey, you need to watch this video. And what it was a video of one of our members in Arizona. And I don't know if we can post a link, or I'm sure we can share it somehow if people want to watch this video. But as a gentleman, his name is Julian, and he is one of our members from that serious mental illness and substance use disorder cohort. I can say all this. He signed a HIPAA waiver, so I'm not violating any HIPAA law. So he is a gentleman who is a single father of 4. He literally broke his back as a construction worker working to provide for his family. Like so many, fell into this opiate trap that is ravaging our nation. And he was just talking about how the past year on our program, he's been able to be completely sober for a full year. He's on medication-assisted therapy. He's taking those medications every day. He also has some other, behavioral health needs, and just this little spark of, hey, like being offered this program at the right time and getting him on this track, and him telling about his family, and his oldest daughter just got a full ride scholarship to college and will be the first generation college attendee. And like, I literally had to sit down and just wept in the SFO terminal. And I said, all the stuff that I'm going through personally is nothing. Like we need to keep going. We need to keep fighting for people like this, because we're already serving thousands of people like this, and there are millions more that we need to help serve. So when you have those moments where you're able to realize that, yeah, this is a job and it's hard, but it's not a job, it's a purpose. That's what is so exciting to us as a team. So all the stats, all the data is great, but hearing about those personal stories is really what keeps us going.
Thank you for sharing that, Matt. That's very inspiring and very noble. And I totally agree. Personally, I can think of a few examples where I was able to have an impact on a patient because of my interaction with that. And, during those times where it is a little bit tough and you kind of ask yourself, like, is this all worth it? And then you remember those moments, you remember those examples where someone called to say thank you. Someone said you made a big difference and you actually saw it happen in real time. That basically puts everything into the right perspective and truly makes it more than worthwhile in the impact that we're trying to have. So thinking a little bit ahead here, Matt, and I know you kind of hit on, some of the challenges, but, where does the future lie with this? And, what are some of the key takeaways that you have for our audience that you'd like them to kind of leave with, as a result of listening to this podcast?
Absolutely. So I'd say the first one is actually probably the least interesting part of the conversation, which is like regulatory and compliance, right? So for very real reasons, CMS has created over time very strict regulations when it comes to rewards and incentives, right? And this applies to the provider side through beneficiary inducement and kickback statutes. This applies to Medicare Advantage plans through their rewards and incentives programs, and it applies through Medicaid more on a state-by-state level, right? And a lot of these regulations were created to prevent fraud and abuse, right? Because for very real reasons, right? You, under a fee-for-service system, you wouldn't want a doctor to be able to pay a patient to say, hey, I'll give you $20 if you come back next month and say your arm hurts so I can bill, Medicare for a CAT scan, right? Like there were very real reasons to create these regulations to prevent that sort of fraud and abuse, right? In the Medicare Advantage space, there were very real reasons to make sure that, there were not discriminatory practices to cherry pick healthy members from the general population, right? So when we were first getting started, like regulatory and compliance questions were by far the biggest, fears that clients would have, right? Over time, we were able to work with those clients, really design our programs in a way to be fully compliant with all those existing regulations, right? Beneficiary inducement and kickback statutes on the provider side, the Medicare Advantage rewards incentives, kind of regulations on the Medicare Advantage side, et cetera, right? Even worked with states to change policy. So I keep mentioning Arizona. We're working with a few great MCOs in Arizona, Arizona Complete Health, which is the Centene plan, but also Health Choice Arizona, which is the Blue Cross Blue Shield Arizona plan, right? Such great organizations. Been able to be super collaborative with Access, the Medicaid regulatory body of Arizona, and actually change their policy to increase the dollar amount so that we could do ongoing behavior change, because their previous policy was just focused on, again, those classic quote unquote incentives, $25 to go get a flu shot, to go get a mammography, to go get an A1C test, right? So they had a $75 limit. They've actually increased that to $300 a year for ongoing behavior change programs like us. But then you're seeing that, hey, as this research base and our, very humbly, our success at creating outcomes has started to become more and more prevalent in the industry, the regulatory bodies are actually changing their guidelines significantly, right? So under traditional Medicare Advantage, you couldn't give rewards and incentives for Part D benefits, which many interpret as saying you can't give incentives related to medication adherence. We have created a program that's fully compliant with those existing regulations, and I can talk to anyone about more details as to why, right? But what was really interesting is in the new VBID model, value-based insurance design model that came out about 2 years ago, not only did CMS say, okay, yes, you can now reward and incentivize Part D measures, but they actually went one step further. And in the RFA itself, one of the key points was we encourage plans to take advantage of behavioral economic research, like giving a full reward up front and requiring action to keep that reward. And as we talked about before, not saying they were writing a regulation to promote wealth, but I've looked at every company in this space, and I only know one company that's using those loss framed incentives to change daily behavior. So it's really cool to see that this tide is shifting from very restrictive regulations to try to prevent fraud and abuse to understanding that behavioral economics can be a very powerful tool when used correctly. And of course, we always want to make sure, again, we're optimizing for all stakeholders, payer, provider, and patient. But if you're doing that and if you're applying these tools correctly, all incentives are aligned, and therefore regulations are starting to catch up pretty significantly. So first takeaway is regulatory framework. It's complex, but it's actually something that we've spent a ton of time thinking about, and even under traditional regulations have solved for compliance. But what's really exciting is the tide has shifted significantly in a number of these use cases, and regulators are actually even promoting the use of behavioral economics now. The second point is just that, there is a way to, kind of create this behavior change, and it's working at scale. And a lot of all of the healthcare system was created with this classical economic model of human behavior. We tell patients, go see these doctors. Those doctors are going to prescribe these tests. They're going to prescribe these medications. They're going to prescribe these habits. And then you're going to have to monitor these metrics over the course of time and just go do it, right? And we are still surprised by the fact that, about half of patients don't follow through with those various steps. So, apply, this is not meant to be just a Wellth pitch, right? It's meant to just change your thinking, right? And think about, use this behavioral economic lens and think about why is that patient not following those steps, right? How could I improve engagement with the healthcare system, and use these behavioral economic tools to do so? And then lastly, just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to Magellan. Thank you to Sagar. Thank you to all of our partners, and for being a part of this journey. And most of all, thank you to our members. And we're so pleased to be a part of your lives and hopefully making a very positive impact in your lives.
Likewise, thank you for sharing your insights as well, Matt. I think overall this has been a very insightful and engaging discussion. I know I myself have learned quite a bit more than what I already knew. And I think it truly does impact how we think about getting members to perform a desired action that's in their best interest, especially with related to their health. It seems like there's definitely a lot of knowledge in this area, but it also at the same time almost seems like we're only scratching the surface of its true potential on a larger scale to really just improve the quality of care and really help members be the best versions of themselves. So thank you again for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us today. Very appreciative, Matt.
Thank you.
What a great conversation about how we can use technology to help motivate and change behavior. We're really going back to a simple idea: reward for good behavior. Wellth took this idea and applied it to medication adherence and have seen amazing results since. You can check out the video of Julian in the show notes, and until we chat again, make sure to subscribe and rate this podcast 5 stars. We'll talk soon.